just already recording because every time that I have not recorded right when we started doing stuff, we get into something that's great and then we don't fucking have it. So
Right.
do that. We were waiting for you last week, Brian, with Tony. I talked to him for 30 minutes and he is just fucking cruising logic. He's like, do you know formal logic? I'm like, I failed it in college. He's like, cool, let's go over it.
Nice.
I've heard that logic just depends on the teacher, much like philosophy.
Yep. Well, relevant today, and I was like making a list of good pragmatism quotes. Charles Sanders Peirce, the founder of pragmatism, said, "Few people care to study logic because everyone reckons himself to already be an expert on the subject."
Fantastic. I started looking at some of those theorems from that stuff when you actually see the if and or but and all this. I was just like, fuck this. That's just like high level calculus,
Yeah, I mean, I can teach some of that stuff, but I haven't had to teach it in a while, and it's certainly not my forte, because it is more like doing math,
Yeah, and you're also like a phenomenal philosopher and an armchair fucker like me, right? So not literally like we'll put a comma in there because it's not like armchair fucker,
Right.
This is where we're going today, Brian.
It sounds like it, man.
Hello, and welcome to the Two Dudes Talk Tattoos podcast, a podcast so great it'll tear the pants right off your hind end. My name is Ryan. I'm one of your co-hosts today. You can find me online at bettertattooing.com, the Better Tattooing YouTube channel, or on Instagram at RIAN_OTHUS. My co-host for this amazing talk is Brian Matthew. That's 1T. You can find him online at the Scarlet Veil Tattoo Gallery, Tailored Fit Tattoo Gallery on Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff, or Brian Matthew Tattoos on Instagram. This week we have on Dr. Spencer. That's Albert Spencer, a professor of philosophy at Portland State University in my hometown. He is a radical person and specializes in the idea of pragmatic philosophy. He also teaches a ton of other stuff. I mean, the dude's written so many books, it'd make your eyes bleed if you try to read them all at the same time. Yeah, I know. Nothing is making a whole lot of sense right now. I am super duper tired and a little bit under the weather, so I'm trying to do this recording right now as our intro under the weather. So thanks for sticking with me. Before we get to it, our commercial break. Ink Master is back with an all-new season on its new home, Paramount Plus. Host Joel Madden is joined by judges Nico Hurtado, Ami James, and Ryan Ashley, and guest star Dave Navarro as the Master of Chaos. Watch as legendary artists go head-to-head for $250,000 and the champion title. The new season of Ink Master is now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus. Head to ParamountPlus.com to try it free. Okay, now that's over, let's talk about pragmatism. Oh my goodness, pragmatism. Now I know a lot of you may be thinking, oh, Ryan, this is supposed to be a show about tattooing. Yeah, it is. We're going to tie everything together towards the end of this episode, which is going to be a lot of fun. But the beginning part of it is really going to be the foundational aspects of what pragmatism is. We're trying to teach you some stuff, people, when you're listening to this. So pay attention, write down some notes or something, ? I don't know. If you want to go ahead and buy Dr. Spencer's book beforehand, you can check it out. We're going to have links in the show description with all the places to find his good work. You can go and support him and everything that he does. Now, since I'm a little bit sick this week, I'm just going to skip right to the homework. Not a whole lot of stuff to do catching up. I mean, past the fact that we have a listener line now, which I think is kind of fun. If you have questions, maybe you want to just be featured on the show, you have something to say, good or bad, whatever in between, hit us up. The phone number is 208-696-1828. You'll know you have the right number if you hear the Gilmore Girls theme song. Yep, that's right. That's how we roll. Gilmore Girls all the way. What else do we have going on right now? We have a couple conventions coming up. Me and Brian have been prepping for. I got my new banner in the other day. It's pretty neat. I was supposed to be putting a nice fancy graphic on it, and I refused to do so. So I just put a bunch of words on it because that's just kind of my style, and I showed it to Brian. He thought it was the dumbest thing he's ever seen. So I know I'm doing something right. Brian, on the other hand, has been crushing just an immense amount of artwork. I don't know how that guy does what he does, but he works so friggin' much. He's going to have a whole bunch of new flash sheets coming out and some new prints and some other stuff. We'll keep you updated when those come out, but let's talk about the live stream coming up next week. If you like the show and you want to talk to us, we are going to have a live stream. Yes, we're going to be doing it across multiple channels, Facebook, YouTube, all that other shit. And you can just come on, listen to us talk about some stuff. We're going to have our buddy Carl coming back on if he's available. I've reached out to him before, and I know everyone really liked that show. Listen to Mr. Carl because he's like the nicest fucking dude in tattooing, hands down. And we're also going to be having my buddy Michael, who I was on his podcast a little while ago talking about drug use and science. He's going to be coming on and doing some other stuff as well. He's also been really helping out on the back end. This dude, I went on his podcast and we just clicked, and him and Brian clicked, and we've all been clicking. Lots of clicking going on. He's been helping out so much with everything. And I just want to start off the show by saying thanks, Mike. You are the man. Anyways, I was talking about homework, right? So let's get to homework. Last week, just take care of yourself. And I actually followed that homework. I went for a little vacation, which was super relaxing. But what happens every time you get back? Oh my goodness, everything just collapses in because you've taken a couple days off. And now you must suffer to the consequences of capitalism. Oh my gosh, nothing's done. Just start working. It's crazy. I took a couple days off. I came back, and there was over 100 emails in my email inbox, and I didn't even know what to do. So rather than deal with it, I just didn't, which I think many of you listening to this part may have possibly done in your own time. It's not the best thing to do, in the service industry. Turning away from potential work contact or, client engagement is usually not the best plan of action. But, honestly, I was just so done. I didn't know how burnt out I was until I hit the road and took a couple days off. So if you were one of the people out there who took the advice inside the homework and treated yourself to a little bit of time off, maybe you're in the same space. So this week's homework is just try not to get overworked again. Oh my gosh. Who would have thought? Now, there's always this tinfoil hat type of person inside of my head that's like, oh my gosh, we don't really know how many people died from this pandemic, but I don't really think that's it. I think that, we know how many people have or may have died, within reason, and I know tinfoil hat aside on this stuff, we could always have a little bit of conjecture trying to figure out exactly, what's happened, who to blame, and all this other stuff. I think that's beside the point. We had time off, people, and capitalism is always marching forward. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to keep producing, and if we haven't produced for a while, we've got to make it up. So this coming week, your homework is stop being a capitalist. Just chill out. Relax. You know what? Nothing is ever going to be done in time. And guess what? If you do get it done in time, there's going to be more work in the future. Just chill out. Relax. Try to take some time to yourself. Get centered. Stay calm. We're coming into the holiday season here in North America, and boy howdy am I ever looking forward to racking up some more charges on top of them credit cards. So if you're like me, and you probably don't make enough money to live within the means that you've created, just chill out, Things are going to happen. Life is going to happen. You're going to get stressed out, and there's, little to nothing that you can do except for just sacrifice. And I know that is one of the easiest things that we can do, especially living in the United States. Now there's a lot of countries out there that maybe are going through the same thing, where you just got to give up something to try and help the betterment of business or industry or the people around you in your society. But let's just chill out a little bit. Let's just try to calm down, rather than trying to give your time to the person who's sitting next to you or across from you or, is sharing a space with you at work. Take some time to yourself. Stay centered, stay relaxed, stay calm. We all got this. Things are going to get better. eventually. I know. We're all praying for a housing crash. Fingers crossed. Cool. So who are you? What's your name? What do you do? Where are you from? What do you specialize in?
Yeah. Well, I'm Albert Spencer. I'm an assistant professor of philosophy at Portland State University. I teach a wide variety of courses, but my area of expertise is American Pragmatism. In fact, I wrote a book on it that came out in 2020.
It's a good book. I have recommended it.
As you can see, we spent most of the budget on, hair and makeup to make me look at the cover there, right? But yeah, so I specialize in American Pragmatism, but I also teach a lot of courses on applied ethics. So things like philosophy of sex and love, military ethics, environmental philosophy. For about 5 to 10 years, I've been studying a lot of indigenous philosophy. So I teach a class on that at Portland State University. And I'm a longtime fan of Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the exciting things recently is I've been bringing my personal hobby and my professional work together, and I'm starting to do more philosophy and Dungeons and Dragons stuff. In fact, in the winter, I'm actually going to be teaching a class on philosophy and Dungeons and Dragons at Portland State University. So a lot of fun stuff. And you can see my nerd cred with the Hellfire Club, stuff like that in the background. So
I told Brian about that, and he was like, geek shit, fucking rad.
Yeah, cool. Like your Funko Pops back there. I got my Bob Ross.
Oh yeah, they're actually some of the most collectible. Somewhere. I love it.
Yeah.
I like how your guys' space is all fucking organized and neat. Mine looks like somebody vomited up death, and I just cleaned too.
To be fair, you're in a garage.
I am in a garage. It's 97 degrees in here right now, so it's not too bad. It's not like last week.
Right, we can't judge you too harshly since it's literally a garage. It looks like a garage.
Yeah, dude, I sorted and organized all of my stuff. I organized my tool drawers again because the kids keep taking them and running them around. Got everything all set. All the extra parts are over there for rebuilding the one car. We're doing great. I can actually walk now. Here. I sent a video before, Albert, to Brian, and I was like, check out what's to my left. And I turned it, it's just like fucking just like to the ceiling garbage. I was like, so today I have my kid out here and I just went, I threw it out the fucking door and then I closed it. I'm like, clean.
As a parent and somebody who does my best to manage a household, the garage is like a holding area before things get kind of flushed out of the house. Yeah. So it's all good.
Right. It's the limbo.
Yeah, it's purgatory.
Purgatory of everything in your house.
Oh, cheesy crazy. Okay, well, let's see about so where's I have so many fucking questions. So why don't you explain to us what pragmatism is? The loose sense, of course. How's that?
Yeah, sure. Pragmatism is a turn of the century philosophy. It originates in America, although there's, some European roots to it. There's also some indigenous roots to a lot of pragmatic thinking as well. But the person considered to be the founder and first pragmatist is the mathematician and logician Charles Sanders Peirce. Peirce is a fascinating character. He was absolutely brilliant. He was the son of like the greatest astronomer at Harvard, real great geniuses who anticipates the 20th century in many ways. He kind of imagined you could use an electric circuit to work out logical equations, which means he had the idea of a computer, and many other different ideas and stuff. But he had a lot of personal problems. He ended up eventually having, problems with drugs, with alcohol and opium and stuff. And so that always made things a little bit challenging for him. Nevertheless, here's what the philosophy means. In one of his works, he wrote the line, "Consider what effects that might conceivably have practical bearings we conceive the object of our conception to have. Then our concept of these effects is the whole of our conception of the object." That's known as the Peirce's pragmatic maxim. And he's basically saying, and this is a logician and mathematician saying this, philosophers tend to get too abstract about stuff. And they need to start, coming back to the concrete, practical effects and relevance of their ideas rather than it just
Ryan.
be.
I'm incredibly pragmatic. He's incredibly.
I like it as he's pointing
prolific.
a fucking gun at the goddamn screen, right?
Well, it's half a gun.
It's
just a receiver.
Yeah, it's so fun. Just like because it's waving. I'm like, is that loaded? That's fucking great.
It's half.
It's half.
No slide.
This is the first time that we recorded a show, and Brian has decided to come on and clean a firearm, which is pretty cool. But
we're shooting it yesterday. I'm going to the range tomorrow.
Oh, this is a perfect time.
Well, that's actually I can use this. Basically, what Peirce is saying is that ideas and concepts are tools.
Yeah.
Like a gun is a tool, right? And or any of the things in your garage there are tools, Ryan. And so, the question is like, how do we use our concepts to solve or engage certain problems in the world? Or how were certain concepts invented in order to deal with certain problems in the world, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of his basic idea. And like I said, he had some challenges with, kind of doing the traditional philosophy route and like getting books published and whatnot. So a lot of the development of pragmatism was through the help of his friend, William James. Now, William James is another fantastic figure. He came from a wealthy family in Boston, Massachusetts.
Boston.
What's that? Yeah, right.
Boston.
For real. And, yeah, when you hear the phrase Boston Brahmin, like James and his family, like that's who they are.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, again, he's another genius. He's a polymath. He spoke like 4 different languages fluently. He came from a rich family, so he was able to go to Europe all the time. Basically, any famous person of the turn of the century you can think of, James probably had lunch with them at some point.
So he's the first socialite, I guess. Like we'll say the first philosopher socialite, maybe of like the modern times. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And Peirce was one of his really good friends, so they had a big impact on one another. And most of the work Peirce was able to do was thanks to James being able to get him jobs and venues and that kind of stuff. But James contributed pragmatism as well. And James is also well known not just as a co-founder of pragmatism, but as the sort of founder of American psychology as well. It's kind of interesting, James went to medical school, but he always had this kind of persistent identity crisis, and suffered from depression a lot throughout his life. So, he graduates medical school, but then he ends up never practicing medicine and like going on an expedition into the Amazon and all these other things to find himself. But we're lucky he did that, because what he ended up doing was working on psychology and bringing a lot of those insights into pragmatism and philosophy as well. Because really, prior to the 20th century, psychology and philosophy were basically the same things. They hadn't separated yet. So you got Freud and Jung coming out of the existentialists in Europe around this time. And you've got James and some others coming out of American pragmatism at the same time, right? So James begins to kind of put it in this more introspective and personalized way of thinking about pragmatism. Writes several really important books like The Principles of Psychology and The Varieties of Religious Experience, which was the first work on comparative religion. He studied all the world religions and kind of objectively talked about their different phenomenon and what the significance of religious experiences are. And then there's other major founders of pragmatism too, such as Jane Addams in Chicago, who founded Hull House. She's often credited as being a social worker, but she was a very important philosopher as well. And much like Peirce was talking about the pragmatic effects of ideas, Jane Addams wanted to emphasize that philosophy needs to go to work and solve social problems, right? like poverty and class problems and issues like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this has a big influence on like the final pragmatist who really systemizes everything, which is John Dewey.
Hang on, so is Cassie fucking building a shed again or something?
I think the dogs are doing something. I just hear roaring in the background.
Every episode, we had one time Cassie was hanging shutters outside. He like turns the camera. She's all, hi, just like drilling into the fucking wall and stuff. It's just like, we don't know if we're recording it until Cassie's come into the frame and been like, hey, do you want some pizza? That's just like, awesome. Anyways, I apologize.
Oh no, no problem. I might have been going on a little too long.
No, you're good. You're good. So. I was gonna say like because we're trying to establish like the foundation of why this is going to be important and how it can be applied tertiarily, if that's even like adjacent to most things we have to deal with, or like tattooing specific, right? Is we have this. Are you done? You just held up a firearm. Is it clean?
Yeah.
Everything's good. Fantastic. Is that the new one?
Clean, clear, beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Ryan was sending me photos of him shooting leaves at a distance, sniping them off. Super duper fun. I don't like guns personally. I enjoy guns. I think they're fantastic as a tool. I don't ever want to use one. Stabby. I'm like Canadian. Canadians stab. They don't shoot, you know? I like to see the whites of their eyes. The light fade. It's hockey culture, right? I like to just see him go down and fucking stay down. That's so fucked up. Anyone who's from Canada who listens to this is gonna be like, yeah, that's totally what it's like. Because like the first day I went to Canada, I was like 18 years old. I get off a plane. I'm in Toronto. I'm like da 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 da. I go to bed, wake up, I turn on the news. So 102.1 The Edge, Toronto, rock and roll, and they have the news come on in the morning, and they're like, oh. You know, there was 3 people pushed into the subway and 8 people stabbed last night. I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, what's with you Canadians? And the person I was with was like, yeah, we don't use guns. We like to see the light leave their eyes when they go down. I was like, Jesus, wept. That's so violent. They're like, you Americans are sissies. You guys will shoot and run away. We come right up to you and let you know we're there. I'm like, all right. Well, I'm glad I'm 18 and decided to leave the country on a whim and figure out what the fuck's going on with my life, and ended up here. Anyways, so let's think about pragmatism in and of itself, right? So if we're taking pragmatism versus like a traditional like Western world philosophy, like European philosophy, how do they divert and become unique? Like what makes one, you know, so much more unique in comparison with like, oh, well, let's just go study some Socrates and, you know, just figure ourselves out as a Stoic person.
Yeah. Well, you know, like philosophy, you know, in European philosophies always had that emphasis on rationality and concepts, and, you know, more of even a mathematical approach. I mean, if you think of Plato, you know, Plato said the forms, like the numbers, are where like knowledge actually resides. Then you get Descartes, you know, who was also a mathematician, saying, I think, therefore I am. How can I have this foundational knowledge? The pragmatists really diverged from that, because their attitude is that the way philosophers think of knowledge doesn't really cohere to the way we actually have knowledge in real life, right? Like we're always in this process of understanding the world. To go back to Dewey, like Dewey was really influenced by Darwin. And so he wanted to talk a lot about the live creature. You know, we're not just these brains in a vat, like Descartes would say. You know, we're more like, you know, like a cougar out in the wilds or something like that, where we're constantly trying to read our natural environment and react and respond to it. And that our knowledge is kind of like this as well. We're always in the process of creating knowledge. So it's messy, it's difficult. It's not really a pyramidal foundation. Peirce likes to use the word like it's like a cable, right? We've got a lot of these different assumptions and claims about the world that are kind of interwoven that help us to understand it, right?
Yeah.
But we don't need to keep thinking of philosophy as, well, we need to get away from experience, or we need to get to the beginning of experience. No, we need to look at the way we actually experience the world and experience knowledge about the world. And so it's a little bit similar to existentialism, which, as I was saying, like occurs during the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But the existentialists are way more focused on personal experience of the world and feeling.
That's like Sartre and was it Bouvier or
Nietzsche, Sartre, Kierkegaard. Whereas,
and all of them had depression, didn't they? Like,
well, I teach existentialism too, and after 10 years of teaching it, I just started off class being like, "Is this just a class in pathology? Am I just telling you about all these people who were suffering from some kind of?"
I don't remember whose class I took with Nietzsche, but they're like, "All right, listen, this book, you can only do like 10 pages max at a time. Like literally, we're going to take it slow. You're going to have to finish this after we finish the semester.
Right.
Because if you have issues, this is going to dip you down into the shit."
I've given that warning in existentialism classes before.
Did I take your existentialism class, dude?
I'm trying to remember. You might have been in there. That might have been me. I didn't want to take credit of it for it, but
listen, this is going to get heavy, guys. It's like when we got into Kierkegaard, they're talking about like his fucking back and how he's just like all fucking sad and shit his whole life. And I was like, oh my God. This is a unique lens and perspective from his own suffering as to how he came up with this ontology. It's like, oh my God.
Right.
Everyone is like, we're rich, but we're in pain. Let's explain what's happening.
Well, there's a lot going on there. I mean, I think for one, it shows, what Kierkegaard shows us is, that the universal doesn't matter. Like the universal experience of the world is not my experience of the world. And so I need to articulate the world from my experience. I also read existentialism more and more of, the European middle class realizing that kind of the myth of progress they had been sold wasn't worth it. So here they are, their material problems have been solved for the middle class, but they're not happy.
Yeah.
They're still like suffering from these crises of meaning and what is purpose. And that's why I actually like pragmatism, because rather than, and I really love the existentialists, but rather than going that route, they turn away. They still embrace feeling and personal experience and psychology. That's what James contributes to it. But they turn towards science and community.
Yeah.
Right. So, and again, that goes back to that notion of pragmatism as solving real world problems or being informed by concrete problems. Right. Because, we're not alone. We're in this together. We've got each other. Our communities may be flawed, but maybe we can make them better, not perfect, but better.
Yeah.
And science as a methodology helps us to actually answer some important questions about the world. So it's not just all knowledge is relative or nihilistic or something like that. We can have some sense of claims on the world as actually being true, right? Or at least conditionally true.
That totally makes sense. I'm sorry.
We're not busting up at what you're saying. It's just this shit coming through my mind. I can hear like dog fights and doors creaking, and it's like living in a haunted house. I don't understand.
Every time we get about 30 minutes where Cassie's just like, when I go to do the editing, I've got like just these sections of Brian's mic where I'm like mute. I was just like, so as long as the background doesn't get you, we'll be fine. One thing I wanted to throw in there is like, I'm seeing, when we were talking about the existentialists, is like trying to compare them to, I have a friend who's from India. And she had said, like there's all these people, these yogis and these people who are like, leaders in spirituality and meditation and like life changing and things like this. And it seems really weird that if you think about the influence, Jesus Christ, there's a fight going on in your place. You just see this
been playing.
Yeah. He's got wolves at his fucking house, Albert. Wolves.
Okay. All right.
But we take those people who are like usually going to be regressed, right? They don't have wealth. They're segregating themselves from society, and they seem to seek enlightenment from this. When we look at that, like as the parallel on the Western side, how it seems to almost be opposite. It seems weird to me. At the same time, when we move over to pragmatism, it's kind of like everyone inside of it was just like, I'm going to sidestep over here. You guys go. My shit's adaptable while you guys are arguing about something concrete, foundational to start any of your bases off of. Is that a good assumption? on that?
You know, I think that it is. You know, one book on pragmatism called The Metaphysical Club by Louis Manan talks about how they were really trying to rethink philosophy after the Civil War, you know, because this does occur. Like James had two brothers who died in the Civil War. I think that's a important way of reading it. Part of the claim that I make in my book is one of the things that pragmatists were dealing with, either consciously or unconsciously, is that the United States is a settler colonial state. In that, you know, people from Europe came here, we might even say invaded, right, and created certain nation states, and, you know, had institutions that were designed for the purpose of, you know, exploiting the land, exploiting the labor of African peoples.
Manifest destiny.
Yeah, manifest. I talk a lot about manifest destiny in the book. And so they're really wrestling with that either explicitly or implicitly. So like Dewey starts doing a lot of his writing in Chicago at the turn of the century. And man, that place was a hotbed of social unrest because its size like doubled 3 or 4 times in 20 years. You had the main railroad hubs of the United States there. So you had like the Pullman strikes and a lot of other riots and things. You had mass immigration coming from Europe, and like there was real trouble with like slums being created and people living in inhumane conditions. So it's like, I'm sorry, Soren and Friedrich, you know, we're not living in beautiful Copenhagen or hiking in the Alps.
Yeah.
We're here dealing with the real problems of what your governments, you know, set up, you know, to create these social experiments over here in the Western world. So there's always that social component of it, and trying to understand, you know, what is the United States as an experiment? What does democracy mean? Democracy is a very important idea to pretty much all of the pragmatists. There's a strong democratic force behind it. Dewey, Adams, and another philosopher named George Herbert Mead were major influencers of the progressive movement, you know, in the 1920s that saw a lot of our progress on labor issues occur. So they do have political commitments, and it would be left leaning, you know, given our current
standards of judging things. Yeah. Brian's from Chicago.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was going to say, civil unrest never ended.
Well, yeah, for real. It just goes into different phases, right?
It's kind of interesting because like how you're describing it, it is, and I've read your book, and I know I've told you before, like your book's awesome. I'm such a big fan of it. Yeah, I'm taking pictures in the margins sometime, and I'll send it to you because I think like you wrote a few 100,000 words, but I'm pretty sure I matched it in the fucking margins. My book is so messy. Anyways, so let's touch on 2 things. Like, one is going to be the political influence of this stuff and where we can see it now today. And then 2, like, how adaptable is pragmatism? Because that's the biggest thing, I think, to me, from what you're saying. I can hear, like, when you're integrating the ideas, how society is, and society is always in flux, right? Like Brian's saying, like, even though there's conflict still in Chicago, go Chicago, and go fucking puppies.
I mean, the white one's the younger one, so he's not as in charge. Brown one's probably kicking his ass.
His dogs are fucking huge.
Wow.
They're not little.
Right.
Like take a German Shepherd and triple it.
Whoa.
One of them is as big as his wife. Yes. He sent me a picture once. He's like, "Look at my dog," and it's just like Cassie's sitting there down. There's this dog on her. Just like head is up here and feet are down there. Like, Jesus Christ.
They're 50% gray wolf. So.
Oh wow. Yeah.
They can be terrifying at times.
I've known some people who've had hybrids like that. They're pretty incredible.
Ink Master is back with a new season and new home, Paramount Plus. Beloved legendary artists, and the artists fans love to hate, return to the shop to battle it out, facing some of the most exciting and epic challenges seen in the history of the competition. All for the biggest grand prize yet, $250,000, and the title of Ink Master. In the new season, host Joel Madden is joined by judges Nico Hurtado, Ami James, and Ryan Ashley, and Dave Navarro as the Master of Chaos. Watch as the artists go head-to-head for the championship title, facing some of the most memorable Flash challenges in the show's history, amped to extreme levels they didn't think possible. They'll have to prove that they're the masters of all the high-level skills that set an Ink Master apart: composition, precision, color theory, finesse, stamina, and endurance. The new season of Ink Master is now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus. Head to ParamountPlus.com to try it for free. We can talk shit too if you want to. There's only one rule though. There's no names. Mm-hmm. You can allude. If you have like a professional beef where you're just like, no one would know except for that one motherfucker.
Oh yeah.
And you just want to be like, okay, guess what? Remember how you wrote all those articles and you did all that stuff? And I just want to call you a motherfucker.
Okay.
We can do that here.
Well, being a pragmatist, we're all about community. So I try to make friends, not enemies. So
back to the thing at hand. Brian. So let's take it back. So pragmatism seems to me to be very adaptable because culture is always in flux, things are changing, things are happening, blah, blah, blah. So it feels like it always has to adapt. While if we're comparing it to more like traditional Western philosophies that seem to be static in time, maybe there's like a benefit to this. The second part would be like, how does that translate to our society as it is right now? Because after reading your book, I know that there was a lot of influence at a certain time that seems to have faded over time, where people were talking about like things like education, and like culture and society in general, like how they can make positive influences moving forward that may benefit each other, which maybe we don't see now. So
yeah, I mean, adaptation is a great verb and one the pragmatists like to use, especially Dewey. I mean, like I said, Dewey was really influenced by Darwin, not the social Darwinism of Herbert Spencer, where it's survival of the fittest. In fact, James Dewey, like they wrote papers, they hated Herbert Spencer and that kind of way of looking at the world, right? Because we don't just improve through competition, we improve through cooperation just as often, right? Mm-hmm. So if you get into a kind of reductive worldview, and the pragmatists were against reductivity, and thinking that there's only one way to succeed at things, that's part of the problem. The pragmatists are real pluralists. So adaptation in that Darwinian sense is very important to Dewey. We're always reacting, responding, and tailoring things to the new situations as they arise. The beautiful part about science is that it's constantly adapting. I mean, in July, we got these first beautiful pictures from the James Webb Space Telescope.
Oh man, those were so neat.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And
the beauty of that is that is going to overturn a lot of knowledge we had about the universe.
The Big Bang is not what we thought it was. I mean, it's still there,
right?
But it's not the same.
Right.
You've got to adapt and change, right?
Right. And so,
looking at it pragmatically.
Yeah, and that's what. And Dewey loves the notion of growth. That's what it means to be a living creature. We're in this process of adapting, of growing, of changing. And so, at the political level, Dewey was very interested in education and democracy. In fact, one of his major works is Democracy and Education, where he says, look, if you want a democratic society, you have to educate students to be participants in a democracy. And so you have to teach them scientific literacy. You have to teach them, civics and basic history and ways
critical thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so let's face it. I mean, there's plenty of like people in this world that really don't want a lot of public education, good quality public education. Because, we can maybe make some George Carlin references here, because we want somebody just smart enough to be able to turn the knobs and pull the levers, but not people with critical thinking who can challenge the system, engage in participatory democracy. Like, I think Dewey would be on board with that idea. And so this does get him labeled as a liberal in our common times, right? Which is justified because, like I said, he was part of the progressive era. And so when we think about like a lot of the policies and the New Deal and stuff, he would have been one of the people like kind of presenting this kind of cooperative vision of what America could be.
The New Deal that's the FDR.
Yeah.
New Deal pushing stuff, trying to be as progressive as some of the more European states have decided to.
And Dewey was
World War II.
And Dewey was from Vermont, which is where Bernie Sanders is also from.
Oh, so it's just in the blood.
Yeah, like I'm sure Bernie Sanders had some kind of a Deweyan education at some point. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So he's definitely like left of center. Most people who study pragmatism are liberals of some stripe, but a good friend of mine named Seth Venata has written a great book called Pragmatism and Conservatism, where he shows how, there are a lot of conservative thinkers who have also used pragmatism in a positive way and in a constructive way. So I would really encourage like anyone who likes philosophy and is politically engaged to read, maybe start with Seth's book if you're, more on the right side of the spectrum, but they have something to say. They have something for us to think about. And so Dewey is often called the father of public education in the United States. But sadly, none of his ideas have ever been fully funded in the United States or implemented widely. I'll tell you where they did get implemented, which is in Scandinavian countries. They adapted Dewey's ideas, and that's why they have the finest public education systems like in the world, pretty much. So
I know it seems counterproductive, at least in the political sense, as to how we identify ourselves as capitalists, leading it in the United States to where we'll see something like that and we automatically deem them as socialists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know, in politics aside, I often think that people conflate communism and socialism, at least like the theories through specific media channels, as being maybe a bit different, especially tying them to Hitler, or maybe fascism and socialism, conflating those two.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of interesting, right? I've got Dr. Venata's stuff up. Is he Morgan State? Yeah. Thank you for that. I have a reading list right now for the past 2 months. It's so long. I've got 16 books on my bedside table.
Remember, Ryan, the value of a library is not in terms of how many books you have read, but how many you haven't read.
Right? Yes.
So, another growth mentality idea there.
Wait, did you hear that?
No. You muted most of it. I gotta hear her leaving the room.
Oh no! I had that orange juice. When I took a drink of it, it tastes like gin. Like it must have fermented or something.
Brian lives in Arkansas right now.
Oh, far out.
And Dr. Spencer, you're from kind of not really nearby, but nearby.
Close enough. I mean, I'm from Eastern Kentucky, Appalachia. I went to school at Baylor University in Texas, so I've driven through Arkansas. I've got happy memories. It's a beautiful place down around the Ozarks and the hot springs and stuff. Yeah.
I live in Eureka Springs, so literally in the Ozarks and the hot springs.
Yeah, I think I drove through there. So again, it's just a cool little town with all those historic buildings and baths and stuff, right?
Yep. The entire town was built in the 1700s, and every building is on the U.S. Historic Registry. So to this day, there's still the same historic buildings. It's pretty wild.
Yeah,
that's cool. It's so different than most of the Pacific Northwest, where we look at something that's 50 years old, we tear it down and put it in a fucking parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, or a Walmart. Not so much anymore. Walmarts aren't. Now it's a new season. Tear it down and put it in an organic market. Anyways,
everybody needs a Whole Foods.
Oh fucking Jesus Christ! At least that's changing soon. With that guy who's running it, I read something about him recently. He's a right-wing hippie. How can you blend those things? I don't know. He started the Whole Foods. They sold it. They kept him on, and he's like, "Ah!"
Is it right-winged because he's conservative?
I don't know.
I don't know. I've got a fair number of friends who would definitely be hippies and libertarians. So maybe that's
my wife. My wife is she's like, I'm a libertarian socialist. That doesn't make sense. She's like, it does. I want gold in the backyard, the government to fuck off, but I want the cops and the schools well funded. I'm like, Jesus.
Well,
libertarian socialist, right at the heart. How would you define yours? Let's do this. So I define myself as an anarcho-social democratic person.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Dr. Spencer? How about you? What would you define yourself as?
I don't know. I mean, my point of view is always like shifting a bit, as far as like adaptation goes. I mean, I'm definitely left of center. I'm not going to deny that. I think as you age, you maybe do drift a little bit towards being more of a moderate on some issues, but I really am. I really think social justice is critically important.
So you said we could talk politics, so I'm like, fucking, let's go, buddy.
Right. So I do believe in the importance of social justice. I mean, I believe systemic racism is real.
Yep.
That's a lot of what I talk about in my book, and that the pragmatists were engaging that to some degree. I mean, I believe that we all benefit from like a good public educational system, including higher ed. You could say that's a belief of convenience and self-serving, but I also devoted my life to this because I thought it was that important. So even if I were not using my degree to teach, I would still really strongly believe in the value of higher education, and that we need more of it, and to make it more accessible to more people. So I'm a bit of a pacifist when it comes to foreign policy, because that's usually been a bad thing, but I'm also a realist on that point of view, right? And Putin invading Ukraine is that's not a good thing, right? And so we've got to be conscientious about that. So I don't know, did I go too far talking about too specific about politics?
Jesus Christ. Hey Brian, what's your political fucking agenda, buddy?
I don't give a fuck what people do. Just leave me alone.
Isolationist. Fantastic. Doomsday prepper. Doomsday prepper. That's let's think about this. So we're almost bringing this around. I want to make sure that people really understand kind of like the importance, which I know we're only touching on briefly. If you want to understand more, you can always buy Dr. Spencer's book. It's fantastic. You are actually like, and I mean, fucking, it doesn't even have to be off the record. I know I told you this many times. Like, you're a really good writer. So it was like an easy read. People think, oh, philosophy, I would rather jerk off a frog than fucking read that stuff. It's like, well, no, this is actually entertaining. I piled through your book, and like I did the first third in a day, and then I had to take a break because of like work and stuff like that. And I did 3 days, I think, total in reading to get through the entire thing.
Cool. So man.
Yeah, it was good.
Well, I would encourage readers to feel free to skip the introduction. I was, if almost the minute you send a manuscript to the publishers, there's so many things you do over. But so yeah, for anybody who does pick up my book, go ahead and skip to the chapters on James and Peirce, or on Dewey and Adams, or really, I think you can skip around in that book and get a good sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
So I encourage that.
I kept like little post-it notes, little like tab markers, and I was going back and forth through a ton of stuff. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting is like how we talk about pragmatism. Like I think in your book you had stated like this is the American philosophy. Like this is truly like when we're thinking about USA, like this is what defined us to begin with at the turn of the 20th century, right? And then it vanished. So why?
Yeah, it did go through an eclipse. So like Dewey lived an incredibly long time. He died in his 90s, and he probably would have lived longer, but he broke his hip playing with his grandkids and then got pneumonia soon afterwards. You know what I mean? He was just that kind of a guy. He was writing till the end of his life. He was president of the American Philosophical Association. But then he dies, I think, in 1952. And very quickly, what happens is known as the eclipse of pragmatism. So, and it's a controversial thing amongst pragmatists and even amongst like professional philosophers in general. But I ended up talking about it in my chapter in my book. It's clear what happened. There was a bit of a hostile takeover of professional philosophy in the United States. So, a lot of people, well, after World War II, you had so many great philosophers in Europe that were fleeing Nazi persecution, and a lot of them came to the United States, particularly those who were Anglo-American analytic philosophers. So still kind of holding on to the notion that philosophy can be conceptual and logical, they're really focusing on philosophy of science, philosophy of language, philosophy of mathematics, right? And, they really, they kind of like took all the good teaching posts and then joined the boards of all the important journals and conferences. And they just stopped inviting pragmatists or people who were doing continental thought or existential thought. They just kind of said, that's not real philosophy. So we're just sort of done with that now. And there's some pretty good evidence of how that takeover happened. I think John McCumber wrote a book called Time in a Ditch, which is about that process.
That's a pretty fucking solid name, right?
Yeah, I know, right? Jeez. And but there's other reasons too. I mean, during the Cold War, you were kind of alluding to this with, well, we think anything that's kind of critical of pragmatism, socialist. So, pragmatism did have this progressive, critical point of view, and they were not Marxists. So Marxists are critical of pragmatists because they're not radical enough, and capitalists are critical of pragmatism because it's not capitalistic enough, right? So they're that's sort of where they fall on those issues. But it would have been probably career suicide to focus on pragmatism or that kind of critical social philosophy during the beginning of the Cold War, right? And plus, a lot of the big people in Anglo-American philosophy, analytic philosophy, were actual war heroes. Like they had the defense industry, the military had basically hired a lot of philosophy professors who specialized in logic and stuff like that for codes, code breaking, all this kind of stuff. Alec Turing, even though he's British, is sort of the best example of this, but there were a lot of people in the United States too. So, and plus pragmatism also really helped give birth to the social sciences. So if you are a student of Dewey's and or James, and you're hearing well, philosophy needs to go to work and solve social problems. If you take them seriously and you're really inspired, you're probably not going to get your PhD in philosophy. You're going to go and become an anthropologist, a sociologist, a political scientist. You're going to go in to some other field that's going to help you to more directly.
This is what you did society. With me. This is what you and Dr. Sager did with me. I was like, well, I was studying philosophy in college and I was like, hey, what should I do? And you both said, fucking quit. I got my associates and I was like, hey, Dr. Spencer, I'm thinking about doing philosophy. He's like, yeah, quit school. I was like, oh, okay. What do you mean? And he's like, just quit. Go out. You're already doing it. Go out. Do it. Jesus Christ. So you got dogs fighting?
Well, let me qualify my statements about the advice I gave you. I think we need more philosophy majors in this world because look, it doesn't matter what you major in terms of what job you actually end up getting. This is just sort of a fact. But when employers are surveyed about what traits they want in a job candidate, they want critical thinking. They want good writing and communication skills. They want the ability to, process information and learn on their own. They want someone who can work across cultures. If only there was a major that let people work on these four things in particular, I wonder what it would be. Well, philosophers do that, but no, that can't be the right answer. Philosophers are great for this. And, really, philosophy is the love of wisdom, or as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. We need more philosophers doing everything in the world. People with that kind of insight, and so I certainly think and the data bears this out. Like most people with philosophy degrees, the median income at mid-career is like 60 grand a year. So, philosophers do okay. To all the parents listening, let your child major in philosophy. They'll be fine, right? Yeah. But yeah, in terms of going on to grad school and becoming a professional philosopher, it's just such a competitive field and stuff. And so, I I wouldn't be doing anything else, you know, and I am like so grateful for the life that I'm living and stuff. But it is one of those things where it's really challenging to find jobs as a professional philosopher today. And so, you know, it's always good to kind of with anything, like, are you sure you really want to do that? Like, if you're committed, if I reject you 3 times and you still want to do it, then like
the East Asian philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. You know, then I'm behind you full force. You know what I'm saying? But you got to be, a little bit like that kung fu master monk, you know, on the mountain, just being like, no.
That's so funny. I remember going into Alex Sager's office, and I don't know if you ever seen that dude type.
Oh,
Jesus wept.
You want to talk about jealous? Yeah.
Oh man, he was holding a whole conversation with me while writing an argument in response to someone's argument against his argument in regards to border theory. And I was like, all you hear, Brian, dude, like legit is zzz. It sounded like a fucking hive of mosquitoes. And he had to stop. And he sat there and put his thumb on his head and he was talking to me and stuff. I'm like, why did you type faster than you fucking person? He's like, hang on. He turned the screen to me and it was catching up. I was like, oh my God, this is a modern computer.
Whoa. I had no idea about that, but
I don't know if he was showboating or something, because like automatically, so I talked to you, I went right to his office right afterwards. And I think I talked to one other person as well. And he did that. And he's like, you should quit. It seems like you already are doing what you want to do. Don't stay here. Don't go in debt. Do you want to teach? I'm like, well, I want to teach something else. He's like, leave. And then he just like, I was like, oh my God. So everyone's like, why'd you stop school, Ryan? I said, because my teachers told me to fucking quit.
Well, I don't remember telling you to quit, but I'm just saying, you know, like
I asked you specifically, I was like, so I want to do philosophy, and I had like all these other things. And you're like, do you want to get a PhD? And I'm like, well, do I need a PhD to do this stuff? You're like, no. And I was like, oh,
well, there you go.
And then you're like, well, then just don't do it. Like, why would you go in debt to go get a PhD if you could just go and do it?
Yeah. Well, that's different. Yeah.
You didn't tell me like punk rock Ryan quit fucking school. You're like,
all right, good.
I was like, I'm heading to 40. Do I need to do this? And you're like, what do you do for work? And I told you like, no.
Yeah, well, we're back to equilibrium now.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't. It's not like you're walking around looking at an 18-year-old kid and you're going, the system's bullshit. Go fuck yourself. Right. Get out there. Fuck the parents. No.
No, I think it's real sad. We're really in a phase where we're getting a lot of anti-higher education propaganda. This has been going on for about 6 years. And it's class warfare stuff. Like I see a lot of people like, what is it? Micro on Dirty Jobs. I love that guy's show. It's so important. You know, I'm the grandson of a coal miner, you know, I know how important dirty jobs are in this world, you know, but even he presents like this false dichotomy that you know, we need more people going into vocational school, but they're being told they need to go to college and then you hear like in the wider conversations about this, that like professors look down on vocational. That can be, we love this sort of stuff. We think it's important. In fact, the pragmatists love that. One of the things that Dewey says is that like, there's no difference in inquiry, whether it's, you know, astrophysicists working on that James Webb Space Telescope or the mechanic trying to figure out what's going on with your car. We're all trying to like solve problems. All work is meaningful, you know. You know, but anyways, it's just one of those things where the two have always been pitted against each other. And man, I know that like the cost of tuition for college has gone through the roof, and we you know, we're finally starting to recognize our student loan crisis and problem we're having with a generation of students now who are under, you know, a lot of debt and stuff. So, you know, it's an issue. It's a real issue. And I can understand why a student has to think twice about that. But, you know, an education is its own reward. As Aristotle said, an education is one of the best provisions for old age. You know, I mean, it's like,
that's a good quote.
Education is about like helping you to become a better person and to think more independently and critical about the world, you know? So, So I think it's just kind of sad that we're in that sort of phase, and obviously we're talking about this a week after Biden announced, $10,000 remission for student loan debt for students. I mean, I'm no economist, but I think that's going to have a lot of positive benefits, not negative. I mean, how many people are not buying houses now because they've got student loan debt to pay off?
Yeah, right? That's going to end up fucking getting jacked up. You see Jay Powell? The Fed chair. They're talking about taking drastic measures that would mimic what we had seen in the 1980s occurring soon. So we could expect possibly at the most mortgage rates doubling from where they're at now.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, and it's particularly hard for millennials. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, so I kind of like rode that last wave of decent economic times. But if you're a Gen Xer, you were born after 9/11. You had to you and your family went through the housing crisis.
Oh, the Gen Z or millennial?
Okay. Really both, because it hit them in two different ways, right? Yeah. I mean, if you were a millennial, you were going on the job market right when the housing market collapsed. You know what I'm saying? And now COVID and stuff. So, things were much more stable, even just two small generations ago, and
that's so funny. I'm at the shop working, and Brian, I don't know if you get this as well, but I see people coming in for a tattoo that are born after Y2K. And I'm like, do you remember people prepping? And they're like, no, I wasn't born yet. I'm like, did your parents prep? They're like, no.
Right.
What do you mean by prepping?
Wait, how old are you, Brian?
What?
I fucking know you for like fucking 4 years, when you said prepping, I don't even know your fucking age.
Are you talking like doomsday prepping?
Yeah,
like
Y2K?
Oh my fucking expecting God. The internet to kill everyone.
How old are you, Brian? I'm having an existential crisis right now. I'm about ready to go and drink a bottle of gin. Oh God,
yeah, but like
old now.
My family didn't prep for anything.
Oh, dude. So the idea was Y2K was the computers handle all the credit and all the banking. They didn't have a 4-digit year, and we were going to be coming up to the new millennia. And so what was going to happen is when it got to 99 and swept over to 2000, instead of being 2000, it was going to go back to 1900, and all debt was going to be erased and all money was going to go away, and the fucking satellites would fall from the sky and China would invade and we'd all fucking die. So people started fucking stockpiling water, ammunition, Huggies, and formula. And they're just like, let's go, bitches. And then all of a sudden, they put out this stupid patch where it's like, I remember if you remember that, Albert, or not, but like you could just go sign up online, CompuServe, beep, beep, right? Hop on, get your shit, and update your computer to make sure that you wouldn't fall victim to this terrifying fucking disaster that was going to happen. People were on rooftops in New York at the start of the fucking new millennia, ready to be picked up by aliens. You had who were the people that did the purple Kool-Aid stuff? There was the dude, the old white guy with the purple robes on TV.
Oh, Hale Bopp.
Yeah, my family was just too poor for all this.
Heaven's Gate, yeah. Ugh, there's so many weird things. Everyone was a prepper back in the 90s in. As soon as Clinton hit, and he's like, "Hey, I got a saxophone. This is going to be a good time, guys." And then it would just went fucking sideways, Like, well, if this guy's running the country, we got to build a bunker,
Yeah.
No, we were just too poor for all of
that. No, my granddad was really fretted about that. He was a religious fundamentalist and what's known as a dispensationalist, which is a way of reading the Bible with heavy emphasis on the end times. And I love my grandfather. He was a big influence to me. I'd love to have a conversation with him today, but he kept saying he wasn't going to die. He was going to be caught up in the rapture. And, he passed away in 2002. So, I mean, it's just, but the truth is, man, I've always,
he just got his math wrong.
Yeah. Right. So I've always had in my mind though, a lot of that, apocalyptic paranoia and stuff.
Yeah.
So the pandemic's been fun.
Oh, that's been fucking great. It's like growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, right? When they just keep moving the time to ascension back every 14 fucking years. Don't worry, we got it right this time. And it's like you're always at that cliff's edge of like, well, it's still coming and you can't fucking relax. Oh,
this whole conversation is just something I don't understand about society.
No. Yeah, you go up in the fucking slums of Chicago, right? It's a little bit different. You just like, you can see your block. This is it.
It's just complete asinine to me to have such a strong emphasis on imaginary things.
Yeah. Brian
doesn't make any sense.
What was the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago? You were talking about the delusions of people and fucking grandeur. When they delude themselves.
Right, delusional grandeur.
Yeah.
It's like you just like think that you're so fucking important, something's gonna happen. It's like, no, you're just a species on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and one day you're gonna die and no one's gonna give a fuck.
Yeah, I like that. I like that
Literally
meme,
it.
you know, where it's like nothing matters. And it's like, yeah, that's right. You know, it's like, and like the guy and the other, like it's two Buddhist monks and the other monk's smiling, you know, like one's in despair and one's happy about that. Right.
That's this right here. I ended up in the hospital a bunch of times just recently because of health stuff. And Brian sends me a text. He's like, I'm glad you're not fucking dead, but if you do die, I'll have one drink for you. And I was like, that actually means a lot, bro. Thank you.
That's love.
He's like, don't think too much on it. It's fine. Just like, that's my buddy right there. Okay, so with the stuff, I know we kind of got on a tangent there, but one thing that you were talking about specifically with like the work and school and all this other stuff, I was thinking about like, what is maybe if you could speak for pragmatism here, and maybe that's not fair at the same time, but maybe what's your idea with the concept nowadays of people being told to find their bliss with work? That people are identifying through their jobs. They're moving out. They're trying to, like, the younger people are trying to go out and do this. I swear to God, Brian, this is going to tie back into fucking tattooing. And so, like, you're going out and you're trying to identify through your work, right? Like, which seems really American. Like, this is a truly, like, Western concept. Like, the value of you as a person inside of society is wholly tied to what benefit you can give monetarily inside of society. So, how would you interpret that as, I guess, a pragmatist? Does it make sense? Is it ludicrous? Is there somewhere in between? Like, how would we identify that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, Dewey's educational idea, you know, he starts with young kids, is that like, if kids aren't interested in the subject, no learning is going to occur, you know? So he's always about education. Yeah, education has to be about practical purposes. So like I said, educating for democracy. But we have to meet our learners where they are so that they're interested and that they have that passion. So passion's important. And I definitely think if you can figure out a way, I mean, I would tell every young kid to dream big and to like figure out what their passion is and to go for it.
Sorry, to cut you off. Did I tell you about my fucking 10-year-old's life goals?
Oh, no.
So all the kids in the school when he was like in second grade, they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And these kids are like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a firefighter. And I want to do these great, big, amazing things. And he came to me and he said, I need to figure out something to do. And I said, okay, Caleb, what's up? And he goes, all right, we got to write a report. I'm like, your handwriting sucks, so I'll help you with it. He's like, okay, cool. He's like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm like, well, what are you good at? He's like, telling people what to do. And I'm like, okay, so let's run with that. What do you want to do when you grow up? He's like, I want to tell people what to do, but I don't want to get in trouble if I'm wrong. I'm like, oh, that's middle management. He's like, middle management? He's like, do I have to go to college for that? And I'm like, no. He's like, oh my gosh, really? No student debt. He's like 8. I'm like, what? Right. He's like, okay, when can I start this? Well, even when you're a teenager, you could probably get a middle management job at a fast food chain or something like that. And he's like, really? He's like, do they make good money? I'm like,
I should have told him to be a politician.
He's like, I said, it's okay money. He's like, great. So if I tell someone something to do and they do it wrong, I don't get in trouble. And I'm like, that's kind of the goal of middle management. Yeah. And he goes, I've done it. I know what I've done. And he just like left. For his report, they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, middle management. And that's all he handed in. And he handed it down like someone else is supposed to write his goddamn paper and walked off. The teacher was like, he's extremely confident. We think he's going to do quite well in life. And I'm like, so I apologize. When I thought of how you're going with that, I thought that would fit in there well. So, anyways,
no, it makes perfect sense.
I hope I didn't make you lose your train.
Oh, no, not at all. So, so I would say like dream big, but, also have little dreams and backup plans and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's no reason not to be ambitious. There's kind of, I'm actually drawing this a bit from Kierkegaard. There's two kinds of despair in life. There's the despair that comes from not achieving your goals. And there's the despair that comes from achieving your goals and realize you kind of set them too low, And Joseph Campbell, who says, follow your bliss, he also has another thing where, before you start climbing the ladder of success, make sure it's up against the right wall. So these things are all important, but at the same time, there's a lot of ways to have a happy life, and you can pursue your passions. They don't have to be your job. And so if you find a life of convenience that helps you to live well, you like your work, you get paid what you need, and then you can do things, that you really want to do in your time off. I mean, that's a wonderful thing too. There's no better way to kill your passion than to make it your job. I mean, that, and, and even with philosophy, I love it, but grad school is really tough because in grad school, you do have to make it your job. And a lot of people, it really kills the desire for doing philosophy during that time and stuff. I kind of think of AC/DC, their first song, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll, if you want to rock and roll, man, if you've got a big dream, all right, let's do it. Let's be committed. Let's give it everything we got. But you got to be ready to, get took and have all these people standing in your way and different stuff going on. So you gotta be bold and you gotta persevere,
So Brian,
but there's
this is where it ties into tattooing, buddy.
Okay, all right.
I was just thinking in my head, I was like, yeah, kids, everyone's excited until you do it for 20 years.
Yeah, which is where we're at. And we're jaded and fucking disjunct, and we're trying to find another way to do it. So the premise, Dr. Spencer, of our show is that I tried to take the science and philosophical side and drive things really far one way. And Brian is an artist in the most purest sense of the way. If I don't know if you've ever seen his artwork or not, I'll have to send you some. The dude fucking knows how to draw. So much so is that I know that there is no fucking way I could ever compete with this guy. No way. But we're going to go and do a convention here soon. And I think this is a perfect description of how we're both doing this differently, right? He sent me a picture earlier this week. His wife sent me a picture. It was 2 days ago or something of what their spread is like at a convention. And he's just, it's fucking beautiful. I can't say anything other than this, Brian. It was a beautiful sight to see how professional, well laid out, well thought out everything was. It was ordered. It was magnificent. And then his wife said, so do you have a banner? Because in the conventions, we have these big banners that kind of roll down the back, right? And I said, no. And so she said, ... ellipses, right? We'd like congruency. Can you please fucking get one? I was like, okay, cool. So she sent me a coupon code as well for another place. So I go on and I make a banner. And normally the banners are these large, elaborate designs with filigree and names and, oh my gosh, all these things and QR codes. And I didn't do that. I had one that had just a bunch of text. So you thought I would post something with a picture that would catch your eye. I didn't think I'd do that. Instead, I'd like to ask you about your tattoo and have all of this fucking script going down 6 feet. And I sent it to Brian, and Brian's response was, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. I would never talk to you ever if I went to a convention. And I said, nailed it. That's the premise of this entire thing. I said to him, and I've done some fucking shit in the past month to this guy, where he's just I can see him just going, what in the fuck is your problem, Ryan? What the fuck? And it's just I've never had somebody type an entire text to me in all caps until Brian. And I was like, yes, we are so much besties. I fucking love you, dude. Anyways, as we're bringing things back around to how we're going to tie this into tattooing, what we see nowadays, it's going to be 2 parts. So we've got an introspective look from the outside in, and of course then externalized viewing from the people who are inside the industry looking out now, right? When we think about tattooing, especially when we're getting into it, a lot of people who are getting into the industry now are seeing it as a sense of freedom attached to the job, right? There's this image that's pulled up in your head of a bit of a rebel, as a bit of this, a bit of that, and you're going to be able to have freedom and find your bliss, and you're able to do all the things you do. But when people end up actually getting into the industry, what they find is that you don't actually have any freedom. Zero. You're literally just designing stuff for other people consistently. Mm-hmm. You are constantly being judged. There's a critique around every corner. You're never good enough, like, especially if you compare yourself against, and like, I got you guys stacked on my screen, so I'm going to point down at Brian because he's underneath me, especially if you're competing with this fucking guy, which is really fucking difficult, right? So if we were to think about how a pragmatist would try to align themselves inside of a situation like this, how would they be able to define that? But not just aesthetically, but let's just say we're thinking about education, inception into the industry and stuff, where maybe you are a bit diluted, maybe you're a bit marketed, maybe you're a bit like convoluted about how the actual outcome of this is going to be. If you were a pragmatist, how would you advise someone to try and like come into this field and maybe like join it, be a part of it?
Well, one of the simplest ways pragmatism gets described, I think it was James said it, truth is what works. I mean, he meant a lot more than that, right? But there's some truth in the notion that truth is what works, right? I mean, you know, with any field you want to get into, you've got to learn to hone your craft, right? And so we may come to any field, whether it's art, literature, philosophy, tattooing, you know, with a vision of like who we want to be and like what kind of things that we want to do. But we've got to put in the work. Yes. You know, pragmatists are all about getting your fingernails dirty, right? Work, community, problem solving, right? So, you know, taking on some kind of apprenticeship, being content to be doing, you know, even if it's not stuff you want to do, what are you learning while it's going on? I gave an example to a friend of mine. We were talking about, you know, like growing up in small towns and stuff. And I told him, I said, my biggest regret was, you know, I'm a musician. I played guitar. I wanted to like be a professional musician when I was younger and stuff. I lived in Appalachia. So that's like the heart of like bluegrass music and all this traditional music and stuff.
Get that jug going, buddy. Hell yeah.
But I hated that stuff, you know, like, I mean, I was a metalhead and, you know, I wanted to, you know, play like Randy Rhoads and Dimebag Darrell. And,
hell yeah.
And, you know, I thought I was James Hetfield from Metallica for a while, that kind of thing, you know. So like, you know, typical teenager, I thought that stuff was beneath me. But now that I'm older, man, what a missed opportunity that was. Like, even if that wasn't the kind of music I wanted to make, right, or a career I wanted to have, I could have gotten so many like more like gigs playing music. I could have learned at the feet of a lot of the local masters on that style of music. You know, another person from my hometown is, you know, multi-platinum Grammy award-winning artist Chris Stapleton, right?
Oh, shit.
Like he's only a few years older than me. Like,
oh, no, like shit.
We've got like, I don't think I ever met him. And that's surprising in a town of 5,000 people when we were both musicians. I think that speaks to how bad a musician I actually was. But you know, that guy put in the work. You know, I didn't. And so I'm a philosopher now, and he's, you know, like one of the great musicians of our generation. I absolutely love his music and live vicariously through his success. But like, you know, and this is what the pragmatist would say. We are shaped by our cultural and our natural environment, right? So invest in that environment. Invest in that community. Learn everything you can from where you are when you were in that place. You know what I mean? It's not to say that you can't travel or that, you know, I certainly understand what it's like if you feel you got to get away from the place that you're born in. I mean, I love where I was born. I have so much respect for it and stuff. But, you know, just one of those stories where I felt like a misfit a lot growing up, you know what I mean? And had to go somewhere else to find those fertile soils for me so that I can be who I am now, right? So that I can be myself. But I would say to any young tattoo artist, like, yeah, it may suck that you got to do, a lot of the clip art or whatever you guys call it that's on the wall, or, people just wanting their girlfriend, boyfriend's name tattooed on their chest or something like that. But that's part of the job. Learn what you can, talk to the people. Maybe you can make some interesting contacts that way. I don't know,
Stay open.
Yeah. And so much of opportunity is being prepared when the door finally opens it. And you're more likely going to be ready for opportunity when it knocks if you're doing the work, if you're prepared, than if you're just complaining about it or being a prima donna about things and, not thinking something's good enough for you or whatever,
Elevating your ego is a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous thing.
It is. And I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard somebody say that they were speaking to people at an art school, and they said, what's the one thing we can tell like students in high school to get them ready for college, for going to art school? And they said, don't tell them that they're talented. Don't tell them that they're great. Stop giving them an unrealistic perspective of how good they are. I mean, inspire them. They weren't saying don't inspire them, but so many people were showing up and not wanting to take basic classes like drawing and sketching and these kinds of things. They weren't wanting to learn the fundamentals because I am the great artist of my generation. I already know this stuff. I should be able to go into the top classes. And it's like, no, there's all these skills you need to learn, and the people there are able to teach you, and you should be amenable to that. So yeah, find what opportunities are available.
The word talent is just a crutch.
What's that? Oh, talent is.
So the word talent is just a crutch.
I think so.
It's an ignorant belief system that forces you to stop actually working on yourself.
Yeah,
just don't buy into it.
I think I saw this on the wall of a sports clip barbershop, but it said, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And, that's something on a barbershop wall, but that's not a bad mantra to carry with you through life, right?
Yeah, everyone just go watch Rudy. Sean Astin will show you just how fucking anything's possible.
Right.
Little Irish Sean Astin, giving it his all for Notre Dame. That's what we want to fucking see. No, I think that's fucking beautiful, especially nowadays. There's a stylization that's happening inside of tattooing where people are forcing themselves to be reductive in their interpretation of the industry as a whole, right? So rather than trying to learn how to tattoo, which Brian and I have been tattooing for 20 years, right? So when we're looking at the idea of application, it's become more focused on the trade or the craft as opposed to an expression of ourself that regardless of what we're coming up with. And dude, I was totally going to say irregardlessliness. That's nasty. I said that to my wife the other day. She just said, fuck you. So when they're looking at themselves in these things and they have that same thing, right? This idea or notion that they can have this freedom. They can think that they can do what they want. They can do all this stuff. And they don't value the experience of someone else because it doesn't match with their ontology, or at least with whatever their idea of the future could hold for them, that it ends up reducing the total knowledge available for the subsequent generations that follow, which is kind of where we ended up, Brian and I, there's always this conflict between him and I, because when he would find something that would work, that was it. And he fucking so good because he's like, this works, fuck off, I'm done, on to the next thing. He test, work, done. Science all the way through, kept getting better. And every time I would get something and I'd be like, this worked. Why? I never had a person to back it up off of to try and test something up, because one, same thing. I was a total fucking prick when I was younger. I'd be like, well, this guy doesn't know shit. And so I had to walk through the fucking mud and 10 years worth of garbage trying to figure out what I was doing was wrong by testing my hypothesis again and again and again and again and again and again. Never having a fact check, never believing in myself either, right? After 10 years, you finally have done so much wrong. You're like, well, all I'm left with is right, which is fucking stupid. Because if I met Brian fucking 20 years ago and he's like, hey, you're being stupid, just do it like this.
Yeah.
World conquest? Question mark.
Maybe. Well, another thing that's big about the pragmatists is the importance of pluralism. Like they don't believe there's any one right way to do anything. Like there's a lot of different ways to be successful. So
they've never done math.
What's that?
They've never done math.
That's such a bad pragmatist joke. Oh my god, you fucking! It's like it's like an abject fucking form of like contesting pluralism. Is like literally you bring up numerical equivalency.
Yeah, right.
It's just like as a philosophical joke. I could see Dr. Spencer's just like Jesus fucking wept, guy. Like, duh, But no.
What? No, I mean, no, mathematics is not linear like that. No. I mean, like with so many things in math, there's multiple ways to get to the right answer.
Forward, back.
I mean,
back,
like,
forward, top, down,
sure, there's something like order of operations. I will give you that, Brian, where you do have to go in certain orders or you're going to get things wrong. But with more complex things, sometimes, like where you start in the equation or what part you work, can be, there can be some variation in there. I'm thinking of like geometric proofs, for example, where if you're given a set of assumptions and you're given a conclusion you're trying to prove, you can take different routes. I mean, and that's a part of logic too. And one of the things I loved, I don't teach logic that much, but one of the things I loved when I did teach logic is it's like being able to read a student's mind, because when a student works a proof, there might be 3 or 4 different ways to solve that problem, but which way is the student going to pick? What flow of logic are they going to go through to get to the correct answer? So even in mathematics, there's a little bit of subjectivity.
Everything is subjective.
Yeah, it may be. It's
always a hair of gray room.
Right. It's obviously much more objective. This is why philosophers have always been tempted to think that mathematics equals truth, right?
Because numerical equivalency is a dangerous fucking thing to apply to stuff. Quantification of like philosophy of mind, right? Trying to quantify experience or ideas or fucking anything. That's a fucking I don't know if I ever told you this. I did the prisoner's dilemma as a project for my ethics class. I wrote a 17-page paper on a 100 level class. And my fucking professor was like, super cool dude, California surfer, right? He came up, he's like, I'm not gonna fucking read this, bro. He's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm like, well, I'm 35. And he goes, why are you doing philosophy? And I said, I think it's fun. He's like, dude, switch majors. Sorry, let's go at some roast that. I'm 2 glasses of wine in. I'm actually getting a little bit buzzed because I've lost 40 pounds this month. Jesus fucking wet. Sorry. Yes. Ended up in the hospital. Brian, running, has worked. I'm down 40 fucking pounds in 3.5 weeks.
Whoa, that's nice.
It sucks. I ate spinach for a week until Brian told me that I could end up getting kidney stones, and then I stopped. Right. I've been taking beetroot powder, a bunch. Like Brian sent me all this stuff. He's like, take this. He's like, let me go to my kitchen. That's how he always goes to all this stuff. He finds all this. Pop, 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 pop. I started taking it, and I'm getting skinny.
Good.
Not wearing sweatpants today. I'm wearing sweat shorts.
Nice.
Anyways, I'll end up having a cut point right there.
I'm not gonna lie, I've been dwelling on that question you originally asked for like the last 25 or 30 minutes when you said something about fucking people finding their bliss through their work or letting their job generate their identity. Like that's the most ignorant thing I've ever heard of. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Like especially as an artist, you need an identity before you generate work. Right? Like you can't find an identity making your work.
No, actually, okay. I guess I could argue on both sides of that stuff because I'm actually having kind of the same debate with Anthony right now. Anthony Watchless, like, fucking, because he's like, how can you remove your identity?
You see so many tattoo artists that just rip off shit.
Yeah.
Like those are the people trying to find an identity through their work. They're just stealing work from everyone else. So their identity essentially is just a lazy fucking idiot. Well, that's the people that had an identity before they actually started creating the artwork, right? Their artwork is their identity. That's why it's fucking original. That's why it looks great.
Well, but I mean, that's always the pathway to mastery.
The whole question pisses me off in terms of
I know, tattoo art. But it's like, you know, when you're trying to learn conventions, you're trying to understand the air quote rules around what you're doing. Mimicry is the first step towards mastery for most people, right? If they're not as fucking skilled as you prick. Like, it's not fair.
Foundationalism is the first step.
Well,
you have to find a foundation and build on it.
Here we go. Foundationalism, Dr. Spencer. Let's talk aesthetics right now. Because Brian is a foundationalist right across the board.
Yeah. And that worked for him. You know, I mean, this is what I was getting at with pluralism. It's like, you know, there's a like, I'm sure when you talk to the masters in any industry or any craft or any art, you know, they've all taken different paths up to the top of that mountain. And, you know, some may be easier ways that are easier to teach or to help people show them how to get up there. And other people, you know, kind of the way you were describing, Ryan, had to forge your own path and like find things out the hard way. I mean, I think that's what I think that's the way it works. And that's a good thing. You know, I mean, the pragmatists were
there's practicality and impracticality.
Right.
That's subjective in and of itself.
Or you can go without a map.
That's fucking no, that doesn't matter. You're not gonna fucking Robert Frost it in the woods and never really go into the fucking woods, right? Like you just like
right.
Anyway.
But the issue, Brian, is that the map is not the territory. The map is just the representation of one other person's experience there. Now, you would probably be smarter to go into the wilds with the map than without a map. But at the same time, you know, like there's people who get beholden to the map. I mean, I think about that. I don't know. There's an episode of The Office where Michael runs his car into the water because the GPS tells him to do so. You know, like it says like go straight, and like it's obvious he's going to run it.
That's why you follow the map and not the GPS.
Right. You know, like so
the GPS is YouTube, kids.
Right. So you know and the world just needs different types and different abilities. People, I mean, we need the people who go off into the wild areas and figure it out or die. We need the people who more systematically go about it and write the maps and then send them back to us.
I can't fucking condone phenomenology. And I don't know why. And I know I had this talk, I think, with you before, Albert, but it was just like, I don't know why I fucking hate this Harvard Divinity School bullshit at the beginning. And I don't know. It just bothers me. And I don't know why. And maybe it's something that's just ephemeral inside of me. It's just so Irish. I'm like, these guys are just a bunch of fucking kooks. And I couldn't fucking deal with it. But that whole idea of just trust in it. God will find a way. I can't do it. I can't. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, that strikes me as a form of
you have to be desperate thinking before that works.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even want to start talking about phenomenology because they're a fucking whatever. A failed American philosophy.
So I'm speaking specifically about tattooing.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I don't give a shit how somebody learned how to peel a potato because you can do it with a spoon if you want to. But
right.
The things that we do on a day-to-day basis are incredibly systematic.
Sure.
They are incredibly meticulous.
Yeah.
You have to have the right information in order to do it. If you just close your fucking eyes and wing it, you're going to fuck up 110 times out of 100.
Yeah. Sure.
So in that aspect, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room for just winging it.
Well, I think we always wing it, right? Because like every person's different. So I mean, we think about the medium and substrate that we're working on. Everyone's skin is going to be different. They're different age. They have a different lifestyle. We can make approximations, right? But not.
Hear me out, though. Everybody has. If you've gone the right way into tattooing, you already have a map, right? Like you already have a foundational knowledge. After that's the first 2 weeks, you have a foundational knowledge of tattooing.
That's the problem.
So, like, if you're following a map and a tree falls down, of course you got to figure out how to get around a tree. But then you can get back onto your map.
Yeah, no, I know,
you get back onto your route.
But like, how much apprenticeship is actually available inside the industry now? That's functional, useful, and actually applicable to the industry. And that's been my fucking argument the whole way along. Like if you were training me, fine, right? If I was, and I've trained people too. It's a fucking like a fucking winding course through shit to try and adapt to them as a person and how their spiritual and physical and emotional needs need us, which I know is totally polar opposite than Brian, right?
See, like, that's useless.
I'm trying to create a deeper fundamental understanding, and you're like, it's not fucking hard. And I think that's great. That's what this always works. I want you to know, like,
really not know it, right? Like, it's a pretty primitive process.
Well, I know
can't
it's
really fuck it up if you have a little bit of information.
Yeah. I know we fucking disagree on that one because I fucking tens of thousands of people out there think or feel like they have the basic primitive information on this stuff. And you go on tattooing for beginners by beginners on Facebook and just spend 5 minutes doom scrolling that shit. Yeah.
So here's the thing though, like that tattooing by beginners for beginners thing, right? Like if you're just looking at people that are in their first 3 weeks of tattooing or first month of tattooing.
Oh my God.
Even if it's the first 5 years, because I always just kind of condense that down. Like 5 years is your first day of tattooing.
Yeah.
That right there is just you're learning to read a map. Right? Like that is your foundation.
Yeah, we have a rule on the show. It's 10 fucking /90. 10% skill, 90% common sense and good fucking decisions. That's tattooing in a nutshell. And actually, I think that's one of the only things we agree on, Brian. Like, how to get there?
That's just my ratio for life.
Are we supposed to be cradling them and kissing them? Are you like fucking throw them out to the wolves? 10% make it. Those are the ones Spartan-esque. Fucking, they were born the right.
Oh, I'm very Spartan in my belief system. That's just it, though. Like, if you coddle somebody too much, they're just gonna fuck shit up almost on purpose. It's almost self-defiant, like they're just, the whole thing is they're just gonna end up fucking it up on purpose because they'd rather have the attention than to actually do the good job. You can't fucking coddle somebody like that. Teach them the shit they need to know and then let them fucking figure out how to problem solve for themselves, right?
Dr. Spencer, what's your take on
tattooing in a nutshell?
How would you take that in your classroom, Dr. Spencer?
Well, I mean, I don't think Brian's wrong. I just think it's not a strict either or and stuff. I mean, yeah, coddling can be bad, but people need to be nurtured. I mean, like at different phases in anybody's journey, they need different teachers and different approaches. And, yes, with something like tattooing, modern tattooing, I mean, you might have a body of knowledge that functions as like the foundational principles for that style or that vocation or that study. But the thing like to remember is that like that didn't come down from Mount Olympus fully formed. You know what I mean? Like there was a process of gaining that knowledge through trial and error. And our tribe needs people who are like the oddballs and the weirdos and the hard cases, right? Because even though they may be more of a danger to themselves now, maybe they've always been more of a danger to themselves than an advantage to the tribe. But like they definitely were the ones that through that trial and error figured stuff out, and we now benefit for it. So it's like, let's go back to Peirce. I mean, Peirce was this genius and stuff, but like he had all these personality problems, and it's like, that we are subjective creatures. We do have certain patterns and habits of mind, and what works really well for one person may not work really well for another. And we get built up a body of knowledge that appears to be the best way to do this for the most number of people, like for efficiency, but it doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work in all circumstances, right? And there's always the possibility that something new will come along and, if not totally disrupt the paradigm, will at least change it significantly. So, I mean, you guys brought me on here to give a pragmatist point of view. I mean, I think that's how a pragmatist would respond to this question of tattooing pedagogy, right?
Yeah, I think it's fucking great. And this is why I'm pointing up, because Albert's above me. That's why he's the best fucking teacher I've ever had in my entire fucking life.
Thank you.
I don't disagree with the idea of quote unquote nurturing, but nurturing is not coddling, right? Yeah. Like nurturing could be as simple as like, hey, you did really good on that today. High five.
Right.
Boom. Easy enough. Coddling is holding somebody's fucking hand the entire goddamn time. And even if they fucked up, reassuring them, like,
right.
That has no room in
this is so Irish.
Industry.
This is the most Irish fucking thing I've ever heard of. Yeah. Okay there, kiddo. You fucking played a good third inning. I loved you for that inning. But if you play shit on the fucking back end, you're going home. We're not getting pizza.
Yeah.
That's the way to raise them.
There you go. And I mean, I teach philosophy of sports. So, this comes up all the time with, whether all kids should get a trophy or whatever, and it's like, look, it's pretty clear with child developmental psychology that up until about second, maybe third grade, every kid should get a trophy because it's more important that they feel like they belong, that they've contributed, that they have a positive experience doing sports, doing the game. After that, though, the child psychology, they start comparing themselves. They start getting a sense of what they're good at, what other people are good at, what they're not good at, and this sort of thing. So even if the parents
start to understand competition,
right? So even if the parents aren't keeping score, the kids are, and like at that point, you are doing a disservice. Where if you're not rewarding talent and not punishing incompetence, we don't have to be that harsh, clearly, but like just being honest, like you lost. And
I thought about Brian right there.
This might not be for you, but if you really enjoy playing, you should stay on the team. Like you can still contribute, or maybe you can, you're not going to be the pitcher,
you're not going to be a star.
You can be, do something good. I mean, and again, that I think gets back to a bit of our society's problem with like perfectionism and unrealistic like ideals about things. And again, the pragmatists are. This is another way of thinking about that. Truth is what works, right? I think every pragmatist would agree, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, Like if you're always, it's not that it's wrong to strive for perfection or excellence, but you just need to do things well. You just need to be the best you can be at something, right? And that's good enough. So, you may not go on to be a professional baseball player or something, but you might have incredible fun and fitness, like doing that through college or high school or something like that. And I think we just need to be more accepting of that. I'm not saying that you're not taking that point of view, Brian. I think that you are, but I'm just sort of like, again, clarifying.
No, I just don't believe in the idea of perfectionism, like chasing perfection.
Right.
That's just stupid.
Right.
It doesn't exist. So you can't really do it.
Well, it's like chasing an ideal, right? Like if you are going after the city of gold, right? You're trying to find that space where maybe you can find eternity and eternal life and salvation, much like if we're going to go back to the old Irish roots there, buddy, how to find our way into heaven.
Somehow just jumping right back into theism. What's happening here?
And that's just how I fucking tie everything into this, right? Might as well go back to Sister Mary Fidelis when she told me after I stabbed poor Stephen in the spine with a darning needle in third grade. I did. This kid flicked my fucking ears every day from kindergarten to third grade. And then we had this social project. We had to start stitching stuff together with some darning needles at the school. So Stephen was sitting there flicking my ears. Big ear, go fuck yourself. And he got called to the front by Mrs. Moore. So I stood up, he started to walk down the aisle, and I stood up with a fucking darning needle and I buried it in his spine. And he hit the fucking ground. He started twitching. I was third. And I leaned over him and I said, "Go fuck yourself, Steven." And Miss Moore went, "Go to the office right now." So I fucking strutted down there halfway, and then I fucking started to lose my steam. And I was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ." I opened the door. I let myself in. I sat down in the chair. And the fucking the administration assistant said, "You can go in and see the head sister right now." I was like, "Okay." So when I sat down, Sister Mary Fidelis looked at me and she said, "Ryan, did you stab poor Stephen in the spine?" I said, "Yes, sister, I did." She said, "Good for you. Grab 2 chocolates and go talk to Father John." And I was like, not asking any questions, grabbed 2 chocolates, left the room, walked down the aisle, down 2 flights of stairs, through a fucking thing, all the way out to the fucking chapel. I'm going to sit in the front pew right in front of the fucking... And I sat. And all of a sudden, this dude in this fucking robe comes out. And he says, "Ryan," as he's walking across, comes down the stairs, sits down next to me. "Did you stab poor Stephen in the spine with a needle?" And I was like, "Yes, Father, I did." And he goes, "Good for you. 5 Hail Marys, then get the fuck out of here." And he fucked off. I was 9 years old.
Did you give him the other piece of chocolate? That's what you were supposed to do.
No, I fucking ate both of them, dude. Fuck that shit.
See, you were a prick when you were a kid.
I guess they knew what this other kid was like, is what you're saying, and
he was a rich prick. My family was.
Everybody knows who a piece of shit is in class.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had big ears when I was little. I had huge ears. They stuck out like fucking Dumbo, and he'd just fucking flick them. He flicked them one time so much till they bled, and never did anything.
Oh man!
And I just kept putting up with it for 4 years. Him and another kid kicked me in a corner until they broke my shin. They held me down and fucking beat me, and they beat me, and they beat me, and the sisters fucking waited because there's no fighting in school, so I never fucking tattled. I never said shit. I took my shit on the fucking chin, and I didn't fucking complain. And one day I fucking stabbed that prick in his spine. Mm-hmm. And after that, he left me alone.
And this is why, as much as I believe in pacifism, I mean, like, realistically, sometimes you got to draw the line in the sand, right?
Pragmatism is adaptable.
Speak softly. Carry a big stick.
Carry a big fucking darning needle.
And the author of that was President Theodore Roosevelt, who was one of William James's students at Harvard. So there you go.
All right, that's our show for today. We'd like to thank Dr. Albert Spencer of Portland State University for coming on and talking pragmatism with us. After we had finished recording, he had said he'd like to come on again, and I think it would be really fun to talk to him specifically now because we got over the hump about work application and how to just like give yourself to the process rather than trying to live your bliss. Have him talk a little bit about aesthetics. I think it'd be fun. Remember to keep in your calendar next week. We are going to be doing our live podcast. It was a live stream. Anyways, we're going to be all over the place. Come and check us out. You can drop in, ask us questions, do whatever you want to do. It's going to be me and Brian and a couple guests coming on and off. Maybe we'll even be wearing fake mustaches. It's going to be fantastic. If you have liked the show, leave us a review as well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of those ones you like. Just go ahead and drop us a 5-star review. Or, maybe a 4 if you think we can improve on stuff. If you go below that, I think you're just being overly critical because we know that the show is really fucking good. So, anyways, keep it up. Stay positive, everyone. I feel like maybe in the beginning there I might have gotten a little bit overly sentimental with the fact I just got off of vacation and I don't know. I just want everyone to be chill. Anyways, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week at the live show. Have a great week. Ink Master is back for an all-new season on its new home, Paramount+. Host Joel Madden is joined by judges Nico Hurtado, Ami James, and Ryan Ashley, and guest star Dave Navarro as the Master of Chaos, as legendary artists go head-to-head for the title. Stream the new season of Ink Master now, exclusively on Paramount+. Head to ParamountPlus.com to try it free.